US DoD hacker identity identified, ransomware campaign using Python Anywhere, Versa Director vulnerability, WordPress plugin WPML remote code execution vulnerability, Voldemort malware, Peach Sandstorm's Tickler malware, fake Global Protect installs malware, Roblox users targeted with a supply chain attack, social engineering campaign targets VPN credentials, and a POC published for the recent IPv6 zero-click vulnerability. All this and more in today's episode of the Cybersecurity Digest. Hello and welcome back to the Cybersecurity Digest, where our goal is to help you stay informed so you can stay secure. Happy Monday, and to those of you celebrating Labor Day as well. I hope you all had a good week last week, and this week is going to be much better because we're getting started here with this show. All right, let's dive right on here. Today is Monday, September 2nd, 2024. And to the return listeners, welcome back, and to the new listeners of the show, welcome. My name is Greg, and I'm your host as we go through the show format of talking about the top 10 stories from this past week, patches, and CISA updates. If these episodes help you stay informed, I would greatly appreciate it if you would please share this show with a colleague or someone you know who likes staying up to date on the latest cybersecurity news. Before we dive into anything today, I just want to thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in so far to the podcast. Across YouTube and all other platforms, the podcast has now reached 1,000 listens. And YouTube, we hit 50 subscribers. I know those numbers may not sound like a lot, but to me, they mean a lot. Thank you so much for your support. I'm extremely grateful. Just as another reminder, there is now a Cybersecurity Digest newsletter where you can A, find our show notes, and B, get a more comprehensive list of news, research, patches, and CISA alerts all sent to your email. These can either come to your email box, like I just mentioned, or you can visit our website to check out our updates there as well. This free resource can be found at thecybersecuritydigest.tech. You can also leave comments on the newsletter if you have any feedback or would like to see a specific article on this show. Alright, it is time to move on to our new segment of the show, the top 10 highlights from this past week. The format of this section, in case you missed last week, is going to be a look at the top 10 most impactful stories or research from the past week. This is in no particular order. If you have any stories that you would like to see talked about on the show, like I mentioned, please comment on the newsletter website, and you can also catch a comprehensive list of all the research there as well. All right, without further ado, let's dive on in. This past week, HackRead published an article that discusses the revelation of the identity of the infamous hacker known as US DoD. US DoD has been linked to several high-profile data breaches recently. US DoD, also known as Equation Corp, has identified himself as Luan G, a 33-year-old Brazilian citizen from Minas Gerais. This hacker has been responsible for significant breaches, including the recent leak of social security numbers from the National Public Data Firm and exposing personal details of 87,000 members from the FBI's InfraGard platform. On this show, I have talked about him in the past in regard to the CrowdStrike incident claiming to have all of the Falcon threat intelligence information. His identity was revealed after being doxxed by the cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, following a conflict that began when US DoD leaked a 100,000-line indicator of compromise list from the company. In a statement to hackread.com, Luan G expressed his intention to leave the cybercrime world and contribute positively to Brazil. He acknowledged his defeat and stated his willingness to face the consequences of his actions. Despite his claims, there is skepticism about his sincerity, with some experts suggesting that his statement might be a tactic to create a distraction from his recent activities. The article also explores the potential legal implications of Luanji's actions. Given the extradition treaty between Brazil and the US, there is a possibility that the US could request his extradition to face charges. However, Brazil's history of not extraditing its own citizens could complicate this process. If Brazil chooses not to extradite him, Luanji may still face legal consequences within Brazil, depending on the country's cybercrime laws. Also from HackRead this past week was another article that discusses the recent discovery by Any.Run researchers of a ransomware campaign exploiting the Python Anywhere cloud platform. This campaign involves the Razor ransomware, which uses Python Anywhere's infrastructure to distribute and encrypt files with AES 256 encryption. The ransomware begins its operation by generating a unique machine ID, an encryption key, and an initialization vector. These details are sent to a command and control server in an unencrypted JSON format, which researchers intercepted and decrypted using Any.Run's man-in-the-middle feature. This provided valuable insights into the ransomware's functioning. The Razor ransomware uses the AES 256 encryption algorithm in cipher block chaining or CBC mode to encrypt the victim's files, making it nearly impossible to access them without the decryption key. The attackers inform their victims about the encryption through a ransom note demanding payment via a specific .tor domain. The malicious file is hosted on the xmb.pythonanywhere.com subdomain, a legitimate platform designed for running Python code and web applications directly in the cloud. This allows the ransomware to evade detection by leveraging a trusted platform. Any.Run's sandbox analysis session revealed the ransomware's behavior in real time, showing systematic file encryption and the use of legitimate subdomain to host the malicious threat. The analysis also uncovered multiple webhooks being redirected to Discord, with each webhook potentially being uniquely used based on its corresponding hash. If you would like to read more about this ransomware, you can check it out in the show notes. Alright, this next story here comes from the Black Lotus Labs team at Lumen Technologies. They recently discovered a zero-day vulnerability in Versa Director servers and identified a CVE known as CVE 2024-39717. This vulnerability affects all Versa Director versions prior to 22.1.4 and is actively being exploited by threat actors. Versa Director servers are crucial for managing network configurations in software-defined wide area network or SD-WAN applications, making them a prime target for cyber attacks. The exploitation involves a custom web shell named VersaMem, which intercepts and harvests credentials, allowing attackers to gain unauthorized access to downstream networks. The VersaMem web shell is sophisticated, operating exclusively in memory to avoid detection. It leverages Java Instrumentation API and Java Sys to dynamically modify Java code, enabling the threat actors to load additional malicious code. The primary functions of VersaMem include intercepting plain text user credentials and allowing the execution of arbitrary Java code. This makes it particularly dangerous as it can compromise the integrity of the entire network infrastructure managed by Versa Director servers. Black Lotus Labs attributes the exploitation of this vulnerability to Chinese state-sponsored threat actors known as Volt Typhoon and Bronze Silhouette. The exploitation campaign has been ongoing since at least June 12, 2024, and has affected several U.S. victims in the ISP, MSP, and IT sectors. The attackers gain initial access through an exposed Versa management port, leading to the deployment of the VersaMem web shell. The campaign is highly targeted and sophisticated, posing significant risks to the affected organizations. Given the severity of the vulnerability and the potential consequences of a successful compromise, Black Lotus Labs strongly recommends upgrading to Versa Director version 22.1.4 or later. They also advise reviewing the guidance provided by Versa Networks and following additional detection and mitigation steps. The information has been shared with appropriate U.S. government agencies to warn of the emerging risks that could impact national strategic assets, and CISA included this article in one of their advisories from this past week. For the full technical details as well as potential IOCs, I highly suggest you check out the full article from the Black Lotus Labs team. Alright, onto something WordPress related. This past week there was a critical vulnerability in the WPML multilingual CMS plugin for WordPress, which is used by over 1 million sites. This vulnerability was disclosed by security researcher Stealthcopter. In the researcher's write-up, he talks about this vulnerability identified as CVE 2024-6386, which allows for authenticated contributor plus remote code execution through a Twig server-side template injection, or SSTI. The vulnerability is rated with a high CVSS score of 9.9, indicating its severity. The issue arises from the plugin's handling of shortcodes, where it fails to properly sanitize input, leading to SSTI. In the write-up, Stealthcopter explains that the vulnerability lies in the handling of shortcodes within the WPML plugin. Specifically, the plugin uses Twig templates for rendering content in shortcodes, but does not sanitize the input correctly. This allows an attacker to inject malicious code through the shortcode, which is then executed on the server. The article provides a detailed walkthrough of how the vulnerability can be exploited, including the use of the dump function to gather necessary characters for constructing commands. To exploit this vulnerability, an attacker needs to be an authenticated user with at least contributor-level access. The article demonstrates how an attacker can use the output from the dump function to create strings needed for command execution. Once basic command execution is achieved, the attacker can further leverage this access to gain more control over the server. The article emphasizes the importance of proper input sanitization and validation to prevent such vulnerabilities. If you are interested in reading more about this write-up from Stealthcopter on this vulnerability, you can find a link for the full write-up in the show notes. If you are currently using WordPress, check if your site uses the WPML plugin, and if you haven't already, please consider patching. Harry Potter fans, you may get excited about this next one due to the name of the malware chosen by the threat actor. A recent campaign identified by Proofpoint researchers in August 2024 showcases a sophisticated and unusual attack chain delivering custom malware named Voldemort. This campaign employs a combination of popular and uncommon techniques for command and control, including the use of Google Sheets. The threat actor impersonates government agencies from various countries using odd file names and passwords like test. Initially suspected to be a red team activity, the large volume of messages and the nature of the malware quickly indicated it was a threat actor, likely an advanced persistent threat or APT, focused on intelligence gathering. The Voldemort malware is a custom backdoor written in C capable of information gathering and dropping additional payloads. The campaign began on August 5, 2024, with over 20,000 messages impacting more than 70 organizations globally. The messages impersonated tax authorities from multiple countries, targeting victims based on their country of residence. The emails were sent from suspected compromised domains, and the actor included the real domain of the agency in the email address to make the messages appear legitimate. The attack chain involves multiple stages, starting with a Google AMP cache URL redirecting to a landing page hosted on Infinity Free. The landing page checks the user agent of the browser and redirects accordingly. If the user agent contains Windows, the browser is redirected to a search MS URI, prompting the victim to open Windows Explorer. This leads to displaying a Windows shortcut file, or LNK, or a zip file containing a similar LNK, masquerading as a PDF file. If executed, the LNK invokes PowerShell to run python.exe from a webdav share, passing a Python script as an argument. The Python script performs various actions, including downloading a decoy PDF and collecting system information. The malware uses Google Sheets for C2, authenticating with a client token to read and write data. The malware can execute commands from the operators with the commands and status messages indicating the malware's name, Voldemort. The campaign also abuses Cloudflare tunnels in Windows Search Protocol to deploy the malware. Proofpoint's analysis reveals that the Voldemort campaign combines techniques commonly seen in cybercriminal activity with features typical of espionage tools. The campaign's characteristics suggest it is likely espionage activity, although the ultimate goals remain unclear. The use of multiple techniques and the large volume of messages make it difficult to assess the threat actor's capabilities and objectives with high confidence. I will be monitoring this going forward, so if you'd like to stay up to date about this, please check out the Cybersecurity Digest newsletter. I'll make sure you're aware there, and I will definitely update this podcast as well once we have some more information. If you would also like to find threat signatures as well as read about the indicators of compromise for the malware that shall not be named, you can find those as well as a fantastic write-up from the group over at Proofpoint in the show notes. One word I certainly did not see myself saying on this podcast was the word Tickler. Greg, how's that relevant to this show, you might be asking yourself? Well, let's talk about it. This past week, Microsoft published an article discussing the activities of an Iranian state-sponsored threat actor, Peach Sandstorm, observed by Microsoft between April and July 2024. During this period, Peach Sandstorm deployed a new custom multi-stage backdoor named Tickler, targeting sectors such as satellite, communications equipment, oil and gas, and government in the United States and the United Arab Emirates. This activity aligns with the group's persistent intelligence gathering objectives, which are believed to support Iranian state interests. Microsoft assesses that Peach Sandstorm operates on behalf of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. Peach Sandstorm has also been conducting password spraying attacks against various sectors including education, satellite, government, and defense to procure infrastructure and collect intelligence. The group has used LinkedIn for social engineering, creating fake profiles to gather information on organizations and individuals in the higher education and satellite sectors. Microsoft states they have taken down these inauthentic LinkedIn accounts and continue to monitor and disrupt Peach Sandstorm's activities. Microsoft also discusses the new tactics, techniques, and procedures used by Peach Sandstorm, including the use of fraudulent Azure subscriptions for command and control infrastructure. Microsoft has disrupted these fraudulent accounts and notified affected organizations. The Tickler malware, a multi-stage backdoor, has been observed in 2 samples, with the second sample showing improvements over the initial one. The malware collects network information and sends it to the C2 server, allowing the threat actor to orient themselves within the compromised network. Microsoft noted that Peach Sandstorm has a history of using password spray attacks to gain access to targets, followed by lateral movement and actions on objectives. The group has been observed using commercial VPN infrastructure for subsequent sign-ins to compromise accounts. In one instance, Peach Sandstorm compromised a European defense organization and moved laterally via the SMB protocol. In another case, the group used a malicious zip file delivered via Microsoft Teams to compromise a Middle East-based satellite operator. To defend against Peach Sandstorm activities, the article recommends implementing mitigations against password spray attacks, strengthening endpoints, and using Microsoft Defender products to detect and respond to associated threat activity. If you'd like to read more about this threat actor, the full article linked will have IOCs, Yara roles, as well as more technical details. Imagine going to install software that you believed was a legitimate client for VPN access into your organization, but it just turned out to be malware. Well, that is what Trend Micro had reported on happening in an article this past week. In the article, Trend Micro discusses a sophisticated malware campaign targeting users in the Middle East, masquerading as the Palo Alto Global Protect tool. This malware employs a 2-stage infection process and uses a command and control infrastructure that pivots to a newly registered URL resembling a company VPN portal. This disguise aids in initial infiltration and helps maintain persistent access to compromised networks. The malware also leverages the Interact SH project for beaconing purposes, allowing threat actors to track the infection's progress through various stages. Written in C#, the malware has several capabilities, including executing remote PowerShell commands, downloading and executing additional payloads, and exfiltrating specific files from the infected machine. These functions highlight the malware's potential to cause significant damage and disruption within targeted organizations. Trend Micro notes that the exact delivery method remains unclear, but it is suspected to be part of a phishing attack that deceives victims into believing they are installing a legitimate Global Protect agent. The infection chain begins with a file named setup.exe, which deploys the fake globalprotect.exe, the primary component of the malware, along with the configuration files. Once executed, the fake globalprotect.exe initiates a beaconing mechanism to notify the threat actor of the successful completion of each phase of the infection process. The malware implements evasion techniques to bypass behavior analysis and sandbox solutions, making it more challenging to detect and mitigate. The malware retrieves various pieces of information from the victim's machine, including IP address, operating system information, username, machine name, and sleep time sequence. It also gathers specific identifiers and encryption keys used to encrypt traffic sent to the CNC server. The malware uses AES encryption for string encryption, enhancing its ability to evade detection and maintain persistent access. I found the full write-up of this to be worth noting. If your organization uses Global Protect, this would be a good time for you to communicate out with your users exactly where they can find approved installers within your organization. Roblox fans, you should be aware of this next one. This past week, Checkmarx Research published an article that discusses a persistent malware campaign targeting Roblox developers through malicious NPM packages. By mimicking the popular noblocks.js library, attackers have published numerous packages designed to steal sensitive data and compromise systems. This campaign exploits trust in the open source ecosystem, particularly targeting the Roblox platform, which has over 70 million daily active users. Despite multiple packages being taken down, new malicious packages continue to appear, requiring developers to remain vigilant against this ongoing threat. The attackers employ various deceptive tactics to create an illusion of authenticity around their malicious packages. These tactics include brand jacking, combo squatting, and star jacking, which make the packages appear as legitimate extensions of the noblocks.js library. Additionally, the malware is meticulously designed within the package itself, with obfuscated code introduced in the post-install.js file. This code is designed to execute automatically upon installation, allowing the malware to operate without the user's knowledge or consent. Checkmarx notes that once installed, the malware searches for Discord authentication tokens, disables security measures like Malwarebytes and Windows Defender, and downloads additional executables from the attacker's GitHub repository. It also manipulates a Windows registry key to ensure it runs consistently on the infected system. The malware collects various types of sensitive information and sends it to the attacker's command and control server using a Discord webhook. The final stage involves deploying QuasarRat, a remote access tool that gives the attacker extensive control over the infected system. Overall, this article from Checkmarx underscored the critical importance of thoroughly vetting packages before incorporating them into projects. Developers, you should definitely remain vigilant, verifying the authenticity of packages, especially those resembling popular libraries. Supply chain attacks are getting more and more common, so definitely ensure that if you are a developer using these types of packages, that you're just checking them out, making sure that they're legitimate and that they are safe to use. If you would like to read more about Checkmarx research, they do have a list of IOCs as well as known malicious packages. This can be found in their article linked in the show notes. The Guidepoint Research and Intelligence Team, also known as GRIT, has been monitoring a sophisticated threat actor targeting over 130 U.S. organizations across various industries. This past week, that team published an article looking at this campaign further. In this article, GRIT discusses that this campaign employs advanced social engineering techniques, including direct phone calls and SMS messages to harvest credentials and one-time passcodes from individual users. The threat actor impersonates help desk or IT staff, convincing users to visit malicious sites that mimic legitimate VPN login pages. These fake pages are designed to capture usernames, passwords, and MFA tokens, allowing the attacker to gain unauthorized access to the organization's network. Once inside the network, the threat actor conducts scans to identify targets for lateral movement, persistence, and privilege escalation. The ultimate goal is financial gain achieved by stealing data, destroying backups, and deploying ransomware. The campaign's sophistication is evident in the creation of custom VPN login pages for each targeted organization, complete with realistic details and additional VPN groups to enhance the social engineering attack. GuidePoint notes that the threat actor has registered several domains resembling the VPN technologies used by the target organizations since June 26, 2024. These domains, along with the associated IP addresses, are part of the ongoing campaign. The attack's success hinges on the ability to operate outside the traditional visibility of security tools, making it crucial for users to report suspicious calls or messages to their security teams. This is another good example of how user education can really help your organization stay secure. Via proper user education here, you can make sure that your end users are aware of these types of malicious phone calls and SMS messages and to not answer them, as well as report them promptly to your security staff. That way you can be aware of what's going on and make sure that your organization stays secure. Alright, our final story for this week is to make you aware of something that has happened. Dark Reading reported earlier this week that a proof of concept has been published for the recently discovered IPv6 zero-click vulnerability being tracked as CVE 2024-38063. This remote code execution flaw affects all Windows systems with IPv6 enabled and was originally discovered by Zhao Wei of Kunlun Lab. The vulnerability allows threat actors to exploit Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server systems without any user interaction. A security researcher named Y.N. Warks has published a proof-of-concept exploit code for this flaw, making it available on GitHub for developers and researchers to study. Also, it makes it available to the bad guys. So just be aware of this risk currently going on here. Microsoft has urged users to apply the latest security updates to mitigate potential threats from this vulnerability. Organizations, if you're running Windows systems with IPv6, you should prioritize patching and monitoring for any unusual IPv6 packet activity. Alright, that's going to wrap up our top 10 for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. It is now time to move on to our next section of the show, Prevalent Patches. Patches were released this week for the following products: GitLab Community and Enterprise Editions. WordPress WPML plugin received a CVS of 9.9 that we discussed earlier. Please look into this one if impacted and patch ASAP. Dell published a BIOS update for several of their Alienware line of devices. Cisco released patches for their NX OS, APIC, and Cloud Network Controller devices. Manage Engine published a fix resolving an SQL injection vulnerability in its Password Manager Pro and PAM 360 products. SAP resolved a vulnerability that exists within several versions of its SAP BEX Java Runtime Web Service. And lastly, Fortra published a fix for a critical CVSS 9.8 vulnerability that was in their File Catalyst workflow 5.1.6 build 139 and earlier. If you have any of these and you want to check out the patches, all the links for these are going to be in the show notes. So please check those out if you feel like that will help you. All right, that wraps it up for Prevalent Patches. It is time for our last segment of the show here today, the CISA Corner. Since our last published episode, CISA has published 4 new known exploited vulnerability alerts, 3 industrial control system alerts, as well as published 2 advisories. This week's known exploited vulnerability additions include vulnerabilities for the following. Google Chromium had 2 vulnerabilities added to CISA's KEV. Apache OFBiz had a single vulnerability added to the KEV, and Versa Director had a single critical vulnerability added as well. The ICS alerts were published for the following 3 products: Rockwell Automation Thin Manager Thin Server, Delta Electronics DTN Soft, Rockwell Automation Factory Talk View Site Edition Update A. Lastly, CISA published 2 different alerts over the past week. The first one was regarding Ransom Hub, who was a ransomware gang that had been attributed as being responsible for the recent cyber attack on Halliburton. And lastly, CISA also published an advisory in which CISA and others warn of attacks being enabled by Iran-based threat actors on U.S. sectors such as education, healthcare, finance, and defense sectors. Alright everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Cybersecurity Digest podcast. I hope you have been enjoying the new format. All links to the stories and research mentioned are in the show notes, which can be found linked below, or you can head to thecybersecuritydigest.tech to view the show notes as well as check out our newsletter. I would love to hear from you regarding the new format, so please leave a comment. If you want to help me and this show out, I would greatly appreciate it if you could like or rate this show in your podcast platform of choice, as well as subscribe. It will help you be notified of the next time that there is an episode of this podcast, as well as helps the algorithm out so more people can discover this show. Thank you all again so much for your support. It makes all of the difference in the world. Before you start your work week, here is a dad joke to get you started. All my books fell off my bookcase. I only have my shelf to blame. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And until next time, stay informed to stay secure.